The Galleria Umberto I, built in Naples between 1887 and 1891 by the architect Emanuele Rocco. Naples, in the days when Vesuvius was still active. At the end of the 19th century, the former capital of the Southern Kingdom as seen by a newsreel cameraman. Folklore aside, Naples, whose last kings were hounded out by Garibaldi in 1860, was one of the largest cities in the recently unified Italian nation, the country's leading port, and an important economic and industrial center. But it was also an unhealthy city, with appalling sanitary conditions that led to 1884's disastrous cholera epidemic. In 1885, a vast slum clearance project was finally launched to gut the city, as they said at the time. The most important undertaking consisted in razing to the ground the whole neighborhood where the epidemic had started. For the Neapolitan bourgeoisie, this was a long-awaited opportunity to mark the city with its imprint. This imprint would be both monumental and modern. A steel and glass dome that provides a spectacular break with the scale and appearance of the old city. The dome conceals one of 19th century architecture's great inventions, a street of a new type, passing through a block of buildings, reserved for pedestrians and sheltered by a glass roof. This is what is known in Italian as a Galleria, and in English as an arcade. The first arcades, built in Paris at the start of the 19th century, were of modest dimensions. They were simple real estate speculation operations carried out by private entrepreneurs in an overcrowded city center. The Galleria Umberto is a distant descendant of this prototype, its monumental version. With shops, restaurants, theaters, offices, and luxury apartments, it's one of the greatest covered arcades ever built. Both a transitory space, a shortcut within the city, and also a place to stroll in, shop, and profit of the advantages of a tamed city, safe from annoyances and bad weather. It was a collective undertaking. No fewer than 5 architects worked on its construction, the main coordinator of the project being the architect Rocco, who, after traveling all over Europe to study the finest existing covered arcades, was awarded the contract in 1885. But the true model for the Galleria Umberto can be found in Milan. It's the famous Galleria Vittorio Emanuele, built 25 years earlier to celebrate Italian unification and the country's entrance into the modern era. The Galleria Umberto copied its cross-shaped design and had the ambition to raise a monument to industry and progress against the fabric of the old city. Its position is a symbol in itself. Near the harbor, its steel and glass outline rears up opposite the former royal palace and the prestigious San Carlo Theater adjacent to it. However, something is out of joint in this staging of the confrontation between old and new. According to the rules of composition at the time, the gallery should have been built along the axis of the older building. But this would have meant demolishing 2 of the oldest churches in the neighborhood. And in Naples, even powered by the strong possible desire for modernity, such an idea was unthinkable. And so the venerable San Fernando and San Brigitte remained along with their entourage of old houses and former palaces, and the Galleria had to adapt to their presence. These sizable fragments of the old city remain embedded between its arms, preventing it from occupying the whole block, forcing it to position itself unevenly and thereby confusing its image. If we remove these old fragments, we see that the Galleria is made up of 4 buildings lining 2 cross streets. Only 2 of the buildings have a closed inner courtyard and an outer facade. Seen from this side, the Galleria appears as a mere luxury real estate project, the best address in the city. At the last minute, as if by surprise, we discover the inner space concealed behind these facades. The architect Rocco worked with a private company that signed an agreement with the city council. It would take charge of raising financing, place compulsory purchase orders on the hovels and demolish them, and then become the sole owner of the new buildings. The first Parisian arcades were built to provide shelter for pedestrians in a neighborhood without pavements and create an easy link between districts of the city. The Galleria fulfills these functions. Its streets are an extension of the public thoroughfare. They are the property of the city that undertakes to light them. In return, they must remain free of access, both day and night. Three of the entrances to these inner streets are marked by gateways in the shape of Roman triumphal arches, the sign of exceptional public areas since ancient times. From the outside, these monumental arches enclose the Galleria entrance. From the inside, they frame views of the old city, sweeping aside its disparities, putting the San Carlo Theater and the private detective's office opposite on the same footing. But even though it seems identical from the inside, the entrance giving onto the San Carlo Theater has been treated in a totally different manner. It's the Galleria's main entrance. To highlight it, the architect has drawn up a large monumental half-circle facade bearing the date and the name of the building. But what use is a monumental facade if we don't have the necessary distance to marvel at it? The Galleria facade is too close to the San Carlo Theater and doesn't have the space in front of it that a monument requires to be admired, unlike the nearby Royal Palace with its vast square. The facade aims to be perfectly symmetrical, but this is merely a ploy to make people forget the poor positioning of the Galleria. Seen from the roof, the effect is perfect. The theater axis passes through the center of the construction. But the architect was obliged to keep up this symmetry down to the ground level, and to achieve this, in addition to the Galleria's true entrance, had to create a trompe-l'oeil symmetrical entrance. A walled-up triumphal arch, because behind it stands the church of San Fernando alongside an old palace. Between the fragment of the old city and the Galleria, a small square survives, another remnant of the old neighborhood. The congregation of San Fernando managed to obtain the preservation of this passageway between the square and the San Carlo Theater. To accommodate it, the architect had to create this alleyway in the center of his monumental facade, an alternative passageway that provides a fifth entrance to the Galleria, a totally useless entrance except for those who wish to avoid using the main arch. Unlike the other entrances, this one is fitted with gates that are closed at the end of the day. Assaulted from all sides by the old city and its confusion, the Galleria has trouble imposing its outer image. However, within, order reigns. It's a city street, but a ceremonial one whose surface is paved with marble like a church or palace. An ideal street with perfect perspective, whose lines seem to reach to infinity. The effect is produced by the total symmetry of the facades that line it, symmetry that is unheard of in a real city, apart from the brutal intervention of strong power. This decor has often been accused of being monotonous and lacking imagination. But this systematic approach, the very opposite of the old city's picturesque nature, can be seen as yet another way of celebrating modern Italy and its recently acquired unity. Only at the extremities of the Galleria's streets does the decor opt for a little variety and fantasy. It becomes lighter and more bucolic, as if sensing the call of the open air. At the exact center of the cross, a large compass rose shows the directions that coincide precisely with the axis of the streets. On checking, the architects have cheated slightly to point the arrow in the right direction. Here, magnetic north is less important than urban north. In the complex arrangement of the various ownership systems of the Galleria, the roofs of the buildings are privately owned, while the glass canopy belongs to the city and the street below. The dome peaks at 56 meters, making it the highest covered arcade in Europe, fulfilling the Neapolitan's dream of outdoing the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele in Milan. A large Neapolitan company specialized in roofing for railway stations built the metal structure. It's a true technical feat. Despite its vast dimensions and span, the canopy manages to maintain an illusion of transparency and lightness. However, the solution used in Naples to fix the canopy to the buildings was strangely outdated. The usual technique at the time consisted in providing the whole arcade with a metal frame that formed a hole with the canopy. Here, the buildings are built in the traditional manner, in stone, and the half-cradle steel girders bearing the canopy are simply laid on top of them. Therefore, the canopy forms an independent element and is even the object of a separate agreement with the developer. Indeed, the Naples City Council had considered not covering the Galleria if finances had been lacking, and of halting construction at the four buildings and their cross streets. A possibility that one cannot really imagine, seeing as how the canopy is the true heart of the project. Through the canopy, the whole project finally manages to break free of the city around it and display its modernity. The presence of this vast glass sky makes the Galleria a place apart, an urban microclimate, a playful break in the cityscape. As in every co-ownership system, the problem started with the roof. The large canopy soon became a bone of contention between the developer and the city council. The developer complained about its very existence. The Galleria soon became a haven for the city's vagrants. Their presence sullied the image of the place and brought the property prices down. But at the same time, the developer accused the city council of failing to meet its obligations, of not maintaining the canopy correctly, leading to countless leaks that damaged the marble flooring and brought property prices down. This contradiction is blatant. It reveals the uneasy cohabitation of the two aspects of the project, public and private. The ground floors are designed to host the shops. The distance between the pilasters is calculated for its windows, and the entablature of the mezzanine is designed for a sign or advertising. In this, the Galleria Umberto follows the tradition of the covered arcade, a street with shops, whose subsequent embodiment, already carried out in Paris during the same period, would be the department store. The residential part of the project is, however, much more original and riskier, too. The residential buildings, referred to as palazzi in Italian, have a certain independence in relation to the Galleria. They have their own street entrance. They also have an entrance leading into the Galleria, but access is carefully controlled. The stairs and landings are decorated in stucco worthy of the project's ambitions. Not 1 inch of wall space is left uncovered. Here, contrary to the outside, no rules rein in the developer's tastes. The theme is the theater and its illusions. Cherubs perched high above the landings raise curtains, also in stucco down to their fringes, revealing the stage where the lift rises. But a residential building also needs its wings. In the realm of private life, nothing is better than a well-sheltered yard where plants grow and laundry dries. And this is where the shoe pinches. Of the 4 buildings making up the Galleria, only 2 have a closed courtyard. The other 2, through the old neighborhood's resistance, do not even have this private space to escape from the city and the view. As for the apartment windows overlooking the Galleria, they have the disadvantages of street windows without their advantages, for this is a particularly noisy inner street with its reverberating sound, and one that doesn't have a real sky. The only ones to be happy with the situation are those living on the roofs, a world of clerks and janitors occupying the service flats built along the edge of the canopy, and which have the one element that defines a quality residence in Naples, a terrace. The residential project was adapted neither to the climate nor to the nature of the place. As a result, numerous apartments never found buyers, compromising the project's financial balance and forcing the developer into bankruptcy. Today, most of the apartments are used as offices or workshops. In addition to the economic failure, this is the failure of a project that aimed to bring together in a single setting both the workplace and the home, creating the bourgeois equivalent of a workers' housing development or Fourier's phalanstery. The utopia of an independent enclave in the heart of the city, a microcosm where people could stroll, work, live, and have fun. In Naples, they say all the palaces were built with the stone taken from their basements. The basement of the Galleria Umberto is fully equipped beneath its whole surface area. An integral part of the project from the word go, it is both the complement and the negative of the Galleria above it, an underground city dedicated to nightlife, leisure pursuits, and pleasure, with restaurants, cafes, and gambling dens. Today, only this billiard table remains in the basement of one of the Galleria's cafes. Other areas have been taken over by shops, while the rest lies abandoned. The basement plan follows that of the Galleria, with 4 arms converging on the center, and there, just beneath the compass rose, a rotunda, the Margherita Theater. A few steps from the San Carlo Theater, its underground and slightly risque counterpart shows the extent to which the Galleria attempted to be a carbon copy of the outside world. But it didn't work. The famed cabaret of the Belle Époque era became a simple variety theater from 1912 on, and then, accompanying the Galleria in its slow decline, a local cinema, then a porn club that ended up closing in the 1960s. With its leaky canopy, closed basement, and unsold apartments transformed into offices, the Galleria has never managed to become the luxury enclave that its developers dreamt of. But how is it possible to reconcile public and private, the enclave and the passageway? Here, the passageway has won. The city arcade that every Neapolitan is fond of because they all end up meeting here. A passage between us and the 19th century with its love of monumental buildings that may seem outdated now, but whose true grandeur is to claim that a public area is, above all, an important area.
Mario!